Check, check. We're rolling. Gray Rock Realty Podcast, episode, I don't remember which number. We took a little break from podcasts. We're always doing a lot on social, but trying to get back in the podcast swing. It's always fun to have these conversations that we have with clients a lot and let you guys hear them. And we got a special guest, Robert Crow, in the studio. Robert, good to have you.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
I'll do this.
Robert is he's at Gray Rock now, and we're super excited to have him. He reached out to me a couple months ago about video, right?
Don't say new. I've been doing this 14 years. I'm new to Gray Rock.
He's new to Gray Rock, I'm sorry.
That's it.
Robert is a veteran agent with many hundreds of transactions under his belt. And
Veteran? It's not a term we use in the UK.
It's not?
No. When I think of veteran, I think of military.
Okay.
So, yeah, when I hear them say there's a veteran football player, he's 35 years old, I'm like, whoa. I'm 38. I'm a veteran. I'm like, senile.
Fair enough.
We got to have some laughing and joking. Right, Ryan?
Right. Well, and just the lingo, I'm just being exposed to a whole new world of... I watched one of your videos the other day, and you said a word, and I can't remember what it was, but...
Yeah, I got a hard time with that.
It's awesome. I love it.
Talk to my wife about torches. There's certain, I've been in the US, 25, 26 years. So, there's certain things I know how to say, right? When somebody says, soccer, football, I'm like, hey, it's okay. Call it soccer. I'm not going to lose sleep over it.
Get it.
But I refuse to use the word flashlight. It's a torch.
Fair enough.
And my wife says it conjures images of people walking around on vampire hunts in Romanian villages. I'm like, no, it's just a torch. My kids get a kick out of that as well.
How about a queue versus a line? Do you say line?
But Americans still say get in the queue, right?
No, never.
I've heard a few Americans say it. The word...
I think they were pandering to you.
Is it in the queue, though? If something's lined up, is it in the queue? I've got that in the queue for you.
I think it could be in the queue, but usually that doesn't refer to people.
Okay.
That's
very specific.
Like a project's in the queue or, yeah.
Depends who I'm talking to. If I'm with my family, it's queue all the way. If I'm yelling at somebody at a soccer match for jumping the queue, I'll say, hey, get in line. Which always goes down well with a British accent, as you can imagine.
Right.
Yeah. There's a few things. Yogurt. Zebra. Yep. Oh, yeah.
Awesome. I've only scratched the surface with this.
And then there's things that I forget how we pronounce in England. I have a British client, and he said, Robert, when is there the most inventory in Fort Collins? And I was like, what? Inventory? People inventing things? They're creating new products? He's like, no, the number of houses, the inventory. And I said, you mean the inventory? He said, that's not how we say it in England. I'm like, are you sure?
Now you're just making stuff up.
Seriously? We say inventory? So, funny thing is, this guy's name is Tom Brady as well, and he moved to the US. Tom Brady, can you imagine?
It's awesome.
Yes. Hey, Tom, if you're watching, you're listening, miss you, buddy.
Nice.
All right, well.
All right, so it's been a wild couple years in real estate, and it's always fun to be with somebody like you that has been in the trenches, so to speak, for a long time. And, I always have my own thoughts about the market, but it's cool to hear somebody else with as much experience as you. And we can sort of just kind of dive in and talk about some anecdotes and what the market is doing. And so that's what we'll do.
Yeah. The number of times I've said to a client, I said to my wife, I wish somebody had followed me around with a video camera today.
Yeah.
Real estate is not what the public thinks it is, right? It's not these New York TV shows where people are yelling at each other. That's incredibly rare, right? Mostly we're collaborating.
Especially not in this town.
Especially not in Fort Collins, right? Where nobody's wearing a tie and suits, right?
Right.
You're in a hoodie and I'm in my Christmas shirt, so.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think this is just a great opportunity for the public to have some real insight into what goes on versus what they see on the television or they might read on our best friend Zillow.
Right.
Yeah, we could do a whole podcast on that, couldn't we?
We certainly could. Yeah, well, let's give people some context. We're coming off of a very slow fall.
Yeah.
Talk to me about seasonality, how that works for our clients and what the different seasons bring, and let's
Right.
start there.
Well, I've been helping people buy and sell real estate since 2012, 2011.
Okay.
The market had just started to pick up then after the 2008 crash. Although in Fort Collins, let's face it, it didn't crash, right? Stayed pretty level compared to places like Atlanta and Vegas.
Phoenix lost about 50% of its median price, and we lost about 4%.
Yeah.
From 08 to 09.
And that 4% includes townhouses. I think single family homes stayed pretty level.
Yeah, it was barely a blip.
Yeah.
I think we'd actually probably had some bigger price corrections with the interest rates than we did in 08. Maybe, it depends on how you slice the data, but.
Yep. So I'd say since that period, the fall of 2024, man, it was like molasses. It's like, where did everybody go? And I get it, right? Because the public doesn't have the same insight that we have. We know that the market really dipped because interest rates shot up. I think we were above 8% at one point.
We were.
For investor rates, somebody buying an investment property, 8.5%. You can't cash flow a rental at 8.5%, not unless you got buckets of cash.
I have a lot of people come to me and say, I want to buy an investment property. And they've ran the numbers on, the 7% rate. Maybe they're barely breaking even. But then you say, well, actually, the investor rate is more like 8 right now. So
Yep.
The investor market's kind of gone.
Well, I did buy a rental in 2024. It's only cash flowing because she's paying dog rent.
She's paying what rent?
Dog rent.
Okay.
The $35 a month I get for dog rent from her is what is cash flowing that property.
Right.
So begs the question, why did I buy a home for rent that is only making $35 a month? Well, while that period was super, super slow, we weren't getting multiple offers. Homes weren't getting bid up. And I know I can refinance it. I know rates are going to come down. When? Hopefully next year or two. But it was a really great price. I felt like it was underpriced. It was a realtor out of Wyoming, doesn't know our market. I got a whole video on why you should never list your home with somebody who doesn't live in northern Colorado. Got a great deal on it. I had a renter lined up. I know it will appreciate in rent. I know it's going to appreciate in price. Versus if that came on the market this March, there's going to be bidding wars, especially if rates come down a little bit.
And that one's in University Acres. Is that right?
No, that's such a property over in Ridgen Farm.
Okay.
Yeah. It's part of a townhome, not a townhouse. It's a townhome, part of 3 units.
Okay.
Ranch property built by Savant. It's great. Lovely home.
I've seen those. Those are great. So to give people some perspective, how much did you have to put down in order to break even on your cash flow?
So on that property, we put down 25%.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what are you getting monthly for that one?
I'm getting $2,935.
Okay. There you go. That's pretty good for a townhome.
It's got a finished basement. It's a higher end unit compared to others that are around. Good build quality. It was too good not to jump on.
Yeah.
And I'm planning for the future. Right? I'm looking to buy now to move into something 10, 15 years down the line.
Sure. Yeah, and a lot of our clients are coming to us saying, well, we really like it here and we want our kids to live here with us someday, and I don't think they're going to be able to afford a house. And I think that's a really wise thing to do because, it hurts to stroke a big check like that to put an investment property in your portfolio. But, I think the writing's on the wall. So many people talk about the similarities between Boulder and Fort Collins, and Boulder's median price is what, $1.1 million, $1.2 million?
Up there for sure.
Our median price is about $600 in Fort Collins proper. It's a little less in Larimer County. It's certainly less in Weld County. And so how different are these towns? They're a little bit different, but certainly
Are you biased? I'm biased.
Well, yes, I'm biased. I love the thing I love about Fort Collins is it's just laid back and you drive around. I go to other towns like I go to Austin. I used to live in Austin a long time ago. And you drive around Austin, every single house is dialed. Like every single house could be in Dwell magazine.
Okay.
There's Ferraris. It's just a different feel.
Yeah.
And you drive around Fort Collins. We did a neighborhood tour the other day of West Fort Collins, and you kind of look back at it and you're like, this town looks real. It's still kind of a sleepy little town.
It is.
There's not a lot of eye candy.
No. I mean, when I moved here, you never saw a sports car, right? People spent their money on bikes.
Yes.
Nobody was buying sports cars, and you still see you definitely see a few now, of course, especially after the influx in 2015. But this town to me is still the same town that I moved to in 2011.
Yeah. I saw a McLaren. There's somebody that has a McLaren in LaPorte. That's about.
Is that Gus? And that's
You know that. Of course, you know that guy. You know everybody.
and that's Gus Berg, the realtor. He's got a McLaren.
Is it black?
I don't know. He gets a new one like every 6 months, but he's not married. He's got no kids.
Hey, why not?
He looks like Lou Ferrigno.
Good to see you, Gus.
Yeah, so that's Gus. Hey, Gus.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go back to seasonality. A couple months ago, it was dead as a doornail. We had a couple listings, and I told my clients, just wait until January. And, there's always this tension about if a property's not selling, when do you do a price drop? And I really felt like we had done our homework on price, and I said, we got to get to January. And you never know. Sometimes Christmas can be a really good time to be on the market. And sure enough, one of those listings went under contract the week before Christmas. And here we are in January, and the other one all of a sudden is going from almost no showings to getting shown multiple times a week, and we're about to get an offer on that one. Another listing, we had multiple offers as soon as, we hit January. I was always trying to understand why the market started to rip so early. It used to be you'd have to get March or April before things really started to wake up. And all of a sudden I'm seeing since COVID, as soon as the new year turns, it's like the phone starts ringing and all this stuff starts happening. And you had a good insight on that I hadn't thought about.
I think December was when the market started to pick up. I think buyers were coming out the woodwork. But yeah, I remember when I got started in real estate, you had to wait till March for the market to pick up. COVID hit, right? And COVID was just insanity. I mean, couldn't keep up. You'd show up to a house, and I remember showing up to a house in Brown's Farm with Rich and Leanne, and the realtor walked out the front door and said, Robert, don't even bother. It just went under contract. I remember saying to him, what do you mean? It just went on the market 4 hours ago. He said, yeah, $50,000 over asking. It's gone. In Brown's Farm, right? Which, hey, good little neighborhood, but it's not Mountain Avenue. It's not Magnolia, right? So I think buyers sort of retrain themselves almost to start a little earlier, a little earlier, a little earlier. And for a while there, February the 15th was a little earlier. Now it's January, or like I say, I think even December. I got 4 homes under contract in December, where November and October, I was shaking the bushes.
Yeah.
And maybe because I was shaking the bushes, I got clients, buyers, some really good December deals. October, November, my wife's looking at me like, everything's okay?
Yeah, it was real slow.
It was real slow.
And, you don't want to be, I feel like when you go on social media and you say, hey guys, the market's really slow right now, this is a really good time to be in the market. I say that until I'm blue in the face, but at the end of the day, like the habit is just set, and it's hard to get people to engage in the fall. And they always say, it's the best time to buy.
Yeah, I think it's a psychological thing. I think buyers think that sellers don't want to sell. So buyers just hang out. Well, let's turn the clock back a little bit, right? So we know mid-June, end of June, the market starts to slow down a bit. And my theory for that, Fort Collins has a lot of families. A lot of families own those homes. What are families doing in June and July in Fort Collins? They're gone. They're out, right? Where are they?
I mean, the summer in Fort Collins is just glorious.
Yeah.
There's only so much.
They're camping.
Yeah. There's too much to do.
How many clients do you have? Like, I'm going camping this weekend. Like, do you have cell phone coverage?
Yeah.
Like, everybody goes and hits the hills. We're only an hour away. Or people get on planes and, pop down to beaches here and there. So the number of homes listed in the summer is much less. And then that drags through into the fall. This year we saw interest rates in the 7s and 8s. Buyers read in the media, slow market, slow market. Well, yeah, it's slow for sellers, but that's great for buyers. And if you're a buyer who's been beaten out in the past, multiple offers, cash, well, buy when nobody else is buying.
That's so true. It is a very strange thing to have a buyer looking at a house and it's perfect for them, and there's just no way you're going to be able to buy this house. As bad as you want it, as much as you would offer over list, even over appraised value, even just more than the house is worth, you may be willing to pay that. You're not going to get it. Now, of course, you and I have pulled off some like Herculean efforts. There are times when you appeal to a seller because you've got, the personal connection, or you write a contract in such a way where the terms are very strong. You remove some contingencies.
A strategy, right?
There's so many different
strategy.
levers you can pull to get an offer accepted, but there are times you're just not going to win. They're going to take the cash and you don't have it.
But you can pull levers and you can pull levers.
You can. Levers. Yeah, that was a really fun thing. But right before we started this podcast, I got a call that we had gotten a property under contract that was competitive, multiple offers. I felt like it was really underpriced. And my client had 20% down payment. And I thought this property, it was an estate sale. They were all moved out. I said, this is going to be bought by somebody with cash. And they want a quick close. They want just the easiest deal that, essentially is closing in 10 days. And so we set her up with a hard money loan so that she was a cash buyer. And that cost her 2 points. So she had to pay about $10,000 more than she would have to get a conventional loan put in place in order to do a cash loan. But we got the property for just a tiny bit over list price, and a situation that, if she wouldn't have had this cash option, she would not have been able to get that property.
Strategy.
Super exciting for her. And just to see a young person get a property like that under contract, cash flow, incredible investment, well under market, probably could turn around tomorrow and sell it for $75,000 more than she's paying for it. And to be a part of helping somebody on their first big step to generating wealth over the course of their life is, I mean, that's why you do it, right? I mean, this is such a difficult job, but situations like that are just, you fist pumping.
Yeah, that was a big win. Another property you're talking about.
Yeah,
that was a big win. I think it was underpriced. I think it could have gone for 600. I was surprised.
Yeah.
I had to push that a little bit, but everybody's got their own motivation.
Right. Yeah, and speed is really important, right? He literally got into that property 2 hours after it was listed. That's not, always possible, but when you can, getting a good jump on a property. And then on the sell side, right, if you're in that situation where somebody gives you an offer, bang, bang, you got to have that conversation. Are we going to take this first offer, or are we going to let the property be on the market for 3 or 4 days? And the person that makes that first offer is like, it's over list price. What more do you want? How are you not going to sign this offer?
See, there, I'd look at the number of showings coming up. I'd look at the number of views online, right? We can track the number of people that are looking at these homes online through the technology we have. And if we've seen that 20, 30 people have already looked at the open house, if we've got 5 or 6 showings booked, and the online stats are 120, 130 views the first couple of days, I think you're going to wait. But if it's Molasses. I love that phrase. And it's a great offer. And it's not always about the cash, right? And it's not always about the money. The money's important, but how soon can they close? What are their dates and deadlines? How quickly are they going to move through the inspection, the due diligence period? Did they put any statement in that contract as to what they will or won't ask for? I love to see people say, we're only going to ask for major structural, safety, mechanical, environmental. That way you're not going to get an inspection objection where they want you to fill every nail hole in the wall. So, yes, money's important. How quickly can they close? Dates and deadlines for due diligence. And then also, do they have a house to sell? You could offer $1 million on a $900,000 house. But if they've got a house to sell in the middle of Nebraska, and we don't know much about that Nebraska market, and that buyer doesn't have a realtor yet, but they're going to call their Aunt Mary, who's got a real estate license, and they'll list it soon, then suddenly that's not $1 million offer. It's $1 million headache, right?
Right. And tell me if you've ever had this experience where you get a cash offer and they send you an Edward Jones investment account and you see that most of the money's in equities and stocks and you're thinking, are they really going to liquidate $1 million worth of stock in order to buy this house? To me, that means, are we sure there's not a hidden contingency here? Because a lot of people will say, yeah, we have the cash or we have the assets. And sure they do, but they intend to use money from the sale of another house. And because they have the assets to show you, they're saying it's a cash offer. But if that other house doesn't close and if they're trying to line the closings up within a couple days, you might have a failed closing. So I've always found like I try to push a little bit and ask about that.
I've done that plenty of times where I've had buyers that have shown their Edward Jones account, their Fidelity accounts. But I always tell the seller, hey, listen, the plan here is to sell the current home. However, if they can't sell their current home, here's their assets. They are well prepared to liquidate those assets if need be.
Yeah.
Right? You got to, good faith. You've got to act in good faith. And also make sure that there's some good earnest money on the table. That makes the seller feel a lot better. So what if you change your mind and you don't liquidate your assets? Well, we're putting $25,000 down in earnest money. That'll buy you a very nice vacation to Hawaii.
Earnest money is a great one of the videos we got the most views on ever was just talking about earnest money. What is it? And just kind of the different scenarios where sometimes it's refundable, sometimes it's not refundable. Maybe you could talk about that. How many times have you made an offer where you waived all the contingencies from day one and you said, if you sign this contract and we don't buy the house, you get our earnest money?
Twice.
I'd
say nearly even 1.5.
Out of many hundreds. So it doesn't happen often, but there's times when people really have to have one, and that's a way to get it done.
Yeah, that is a strategy that can be used for sure. And the 1.5, 2 times that we used it, it worked. And we got to closing, and it was a beautiful transaction. Super clean. Everybody stuck to their word. Ideal. But there's some risk there. And I think the seller needs to be prepared to lose that earnest money. Because people watching this right now probably don't realize that every state has their own real estate contracts. And a contract in Mississippi looks very different to a contract in California. When our California buyers come here and they look at our contracts and they're like, is that it? Where are the rest of the pages? Where I've had a contract from Mississippi and it's like minimal. So in Colorado, the real estate contract allows a buyer multiple opportunities to terminate and get their earnest money back. A seller does not really have that option, right? Once the seller signs that document, unless the buyer defaults, the seller has to sell that house. So one of the ways that you can employ strategy, like you're talking about in a real estate contract, is you can take some of those dates and deadlines out that give the buyer the chance to terminate, And when the seller sees that, it's like evening up the playing field. It's like Manchester United playing against the Colorado Rapids, and you swap a few different players around on the team. Or Broncos Rams, if you prefer.
And it's an interesting conversation to have with a buyer because as a realtor, you want to protect your buyer as much as you can. You want to make sure that if something goes south on this deal and they have to walk away, that they can get their earnest money back. But at the same time, on the sell side, if you're looking at this contract and we have a whole bunch of dates in there, and each one of those dates represents essentially a way for a buyer to get out of the contract, and you're trying to make either win in a competitive situation or trying to knock a bunch of money off the price, but also communicate to the seller, we're going to get this done, and we're trying to reduce the amount of ways that we can walk away from this deal. Financing contingency, I think, is the biggest one. If you have a client that is putting a lot of money down, is borrowing well within their financial capabilities, and they've gone down the road with the lender and you know that the loan is going to close, you really need to put that loan contingency in there. There are certain... Sorry, go ahead.
Let's clarify that for people watching. So typically, let's say a typical closing is 30 days.
Yep.
From having an offer accepted to signing that big stack of papers on closing day. Within the Colorado resale contract, there is a contingency that allows the buyer to back out if they have a major problem with their loan. And it can be, I don't like my loan anymore. I don't like my interest rate. I mean, it has to be something legitimate, highly likely that the lender would have to put in writing that the buyer lost their job or somebody sadly passed away. And at this point, they cannot afford the house.
Yep.
It can be interest rates went up and we forgot to lock in the loan. So 7 days prior to closing, on average, is when we see that deadline. So the seller is on eggshells all the way to day 23, hoping that buyer does not terminate for a loan reason. So you would ask me how many times I've put that into a contract where we've removed all the contingencies. A couple of weeks ago, I had some buyers. We're going up against two other offers. One was cash. One buyer works for a nonprofit, been there many years. The other one works for CSU, Colorado State University, right? About as solid as you can get. They had good income. They had good down payment. I said to them, if we take this deadline out, we're almost as good as cash. 99.5% as good as cash. And they said to me, what is the ramification, Robert, if we terminate? Well, you lose your earnest money. How much is the earnest money? $7,000. They said, to get this house, we are willing to take that risk. And we beat out the cash offer, the other loan offer that was for a higher amount. And they got the hope. And the whole thing went perfectly smooth.
Certainty is such an important part of a contract for a seller. And so many of the way that the times realtors submit offers, there is no certainty whatsoever. And I think a lot of agents get into ruts of just, I need to protect my client. I want to give them all the dates and deadlines. But at the end of the day, especially in a competitive situation, you've got to give the seller some peace of mind. It's unreasonable, I think, to tie a property up and have it switch status on the MLS for 30 days and then still be able to walk away from the deal and the seller gets no money. And in a lot of other states and Texas, you basically have an option fee so that when you go under contract with a seller, you pay them a certain amount. It's usually like $500 or $1,000. And if you walk away from the deal for any reason, you lose that money.
Hold on. So you go under contract, you pay them the option fee, you go in the attic, it's full of possums, right?
The option fee is completely non-refundable no matter what.
What if the seller completely hid that they had a family of possums living in their attic?
Well, the option fee is much less than earnest money, right?
But
it's a couple $100. And yes, there's always the possibility that there could be something terrible that was not disclosed and you lose your $500 or $1,000.
Wow.
So
that doesn't happen in Colorado.
Right?
Yep.
But you hear of realtors in Texas when the market was insane after COVID, they would flip instead of doing, $5,000 earnest money, they would do $5,000 option fee day one, non-refundable, just to put the property under contract.
Interesting.
And of course, there's just a lot of fallout from that because, like you said, there could be all kinds of problems and you just lose the money. And so,
I've never had possums. I've had bats.
yes,
Bats in a house in Wellington that you can't
that's a problem.
remove.
Yep.
You can deter them, but you can't remove them.
Yeah.
So let's loop this back to this slow period in the market, because you and I are talking about all these things that we had to do to help buyers win in a highly competitive market, right? Making earnest money go hard, removing contingencies. We're buying houses as is with all faults, still allowing the buyer the opportunity to back out if they find something terrible, right? Major foundational issues, that kind of thing. But during the slow market, you don't have to do that. And not only do you not have to do that, during the slow market, when you do your inspection, you have so much more leverage. Leverage. Do we say leverage in England?
You tell me.
I don't know. It's one of those instances. Leverage. You have so much more leverage with the seller because they know that you might be their one and only buyer. That house may have been on the market 20 days. And the seller's like, oh, hallelujah, we got a buyer. Versus back in 2021. What was the most offers you got on a house in 2021?
25.
27 for me. Sarah Yoda, 27 offers on my birthday. My wife was so mad. So yeah, here we are in August, September of 2024. And the seller's like, whatever they need. They need a new hot water heater. What's that? $2,000? Absolutely. Let's do it. Versus 2021, you want a hot water heater? I'll buy you a kettle on closing day. But as a seller, they're giving the buyer nothing because there's 10 other offers.
It's so much different. It's hard to overstate it. And I think for realtors and for our clients, just the quality of the experience of buying a house right now, of course, the payment is awful and 7% interest rates, however long we're going to have to endure those.
Sure,
it's a real
but
thing.
There's ways around that, right?
There
We'll
are.
talk about that in a minute.
We can talk about buy downs, but the fact that you get to look at a house and think about it for a day, sometimes a couple days, or look at a house that's been sitting there for, 2 or 3 months.
Yep.
Is really nice. And the overall anxiety that a competitive market produces, almost all of that is gone. I mean, if you can deal with the payment and you can figure out a buy down or a strategy to, get the property under contract, even though, your payment's painful in a lot of cases, the whole experience and the fact that you don't have to waive contingencies in most cases. Now, of course, there's always exceptions. There's always going to be underpriced properties or truly exceptional special properties that appeal to a whole bunch of people, and they are going to be competitive. But on the whole, I mean, the house we just put under contract, there was ours and 2 other offers. I felt like it was $50,000 or $75,000 underpriced.
Agreed.
A couple years ago, that would have been 30.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's just a different world. So there are definitely benefits.
That's your neck of the woods, right? You live over.
Yeah.
It's the Laporte house, right? Yeah.
Yeah, this was West Fort Collins. Yeah.
You know it. So let's talk about those buy downs.
Yeah.
Because these are magical and they've been around for decades.
Yep.
But we've only started to see them in the last couple of years because interest rates have climbed up. And, you and I do a lot of video, we do a lot of social media, we talk to a lot of people, we know a lot of people, and it still amazes me how few people know about buy downs. How few realtors know about buy downs. I was talking to a realtor with 30 years experience, and she knew about it, but she didn't know how it was paid for. That was a bit surprising to me. So, buy downs, feel free to jump in here, because this took me a little bit of time to get my head around as well.
Yeah.
If interest rates are currently at 7%, you can do a 2-1 buy down, for example. And this is what they call a temporary buy down, where for the first year, you are buying down that interest rate from 7 to 5%. And it's 5% for the first year. And that's the two part, right? The 2 percentage points. And then after 12 months, the interest rate goes from 5 to 6%. So that's a 1% discount off that 7%. That's the one part of the 2-1 buy down. And then in year 3, it goes back to 7%. So first rule of thumb, if you cannot afford that house at 7%, don't buy it. If that's going to have you eating ramen or pot noodles if you're from England, do not buy that house. But if you can afford that house at 7% and you can play the game and work the system, do a 2-1 buy down. And let's say on a $500,000 house, that 2-1 buy down probably costs, and I'm pulling this number out of the air, but I think it's pretty close, about 10 grand. Fair enough?
Yep.
So you ask the seller to pay that. If that house is fairly priced at $500,000, it's been on the market a couple of weeks, the seller's going to have some flexibility. Ask that seller to pay that $10,000 for your 2-1 buy down and see how much it dramatically drops your payment. 10 grand off the price, probably save you $70 a month on your mortgage payment. Bringing that interest rate from 7 down to 5 is in the hundreds. So imagine that $10,000 going into a bucket, right? There's a bucket full of envelopes, and in those envelopes is cash. The way this works is, if the seller agrees to the 2-1 buy down, you close. Every month, the lender puts their hands in that bucket, brings out an envelope of cash, and that goes towards buying down your interest rate for this month. Let's say interest rates drop massively after the first year. It goes from 7 to 5.5%, which we all think is going to be the golden number. My buyer's going to call me and be like, Robert, you gave me the worst advice ever. We should have gone for the 10 grand off instead. I used that 10 grand towards a buy down. Now interest rates are at 5.5% and I've lost all those envelopes in that bucket you told me about. Not true. If during those first 2 years you refinance, whatever envelopes are left in that bucket, you get to use towards your closing costs or buy down your principal. It's brilliant.
You can't lose.
You cannot lose as long as you're comfortable at 7% in the event that interest rates don't drop. And we just did this for a client. And she's like, it's 7%. I can just make it work. We got her a 2-1 buy down, paid for by the seller. And she said, well, Robert, worst case scenario, in 2 years' time, I know because she works at a company that does yearly pay raises, I know I can afford that. The 2-1 buy down makes a huge difference for me right now. But worst case scenario, I can handle the 7% payment for a couple of years for sure.
Yeah. And yeah, hopefully rates are down. I don't think it'll take much for them to get down in the low 6s. They were in the low 6s in September of this year.
Yep.
We saw a big upswing. Even though it's a slow time of year, we saw an upswing in prices.
It was crazy, right? There was a number of houses that had sat on the market for 40, 50, 60 days. Interest rates dropped just a little bit, and those houses all went under contract. Ping, 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 ping.
Yeah.
Just like that.
So you can imagine what it will be like when they hit high 5s. I think 5, if we get into the 5s, it's going to be game changer.
5.5% is what I'm reading.
Yeah, I mean, the spreads, right? The difference between the 10-year treasury and the mortgage rate usually are not, they stay pretty close, and usually the mortgage rate is like 1.5 points higher. Well, now it's closer to 2 points higher than the 10-year. So that's why a lot of the analysts think, because there's so much volatility with inflation, and every time the Fed meets, everything gets reworked and people are reevaluating everything. There's a large spread between those. But if the spread gets better, it could bring rates all the way down to the high 5s.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I definitely don't want to project, that interest rates will go down for sure. I tell clients all the time, this inflation seems really sticky. And the economy seems really resilient, meaning the economy's not crumbling the way that the Fed would like to see in order to, start to quell inflation.
Well, and you're talking about a national scale as well.
Yeah,
Fort Collins is a little bit shielded, right?
Sure.
It's kind of protected here.
it is.
I always say if there's a zombie apocalypse, you don't have to leave Fort Collins, right?
Right. Yeah, I mean, we talked about the 2008 prices at the beginning. Over the last couple years, I've been comparing Fort Collins with Austin. Austin lost about 23% of its median price during this interest rate surge. Our biggest price correction was about 3% again. But this year, if you look at the entire year of 24 versus 23, we were up about 4%. So we're still just not seeing price corrections.
Because more people are moving here than leaving.
Yes.
And I know you and I share the same opinion on new construction.
Yep.
Right? When the market crashed in 2008, there was tons and tons of homes being built and sat unsold. Builders aren't doing that now. And they're doing that because they kind of learned that lesson.
Right.
And secondly, right, we have water challenges in northern Colorado. There's only so much water to go around. And there's a neighborhood that you and I know about that's been in the planning stages for years and years and years.
Over a decade.
And they've not broken ground yet. And one of the biggest reasons is because they didn't secure enough water rights.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to see these developers, with hundreds of millions of dollars to spend on this project. They go to Elko and they say, we got a lot of money. We want water taps. And Elko's like, I don't care how much money you have. We can't create water out of thin air. We have an existing customer base we have to protect. Right. And good on them, right? I mean, I have clients come from out of town. They read about water here, and they're concerned that at some point they're going to turn their faucet on and no water is going to come out. And I tell them it's kind of the opposite. All these water problems is, they're really trying to protect their existing customers. And I always think it's interesting, as dry as this area is, we don't ever have mandatory water restrictions on watering lawns that I can remember. We have voluntary restrictions. We have, water on a Wednesday or whatever they do. But it's not like California will just say, like, you can't fill up your pool, you can't water outside.
I can think of twice. And that must
where it was mandatory?
Yeah. That was probably 2012, 2013. I can remember twice.
Yeah.
That happening, but it's been a long time.
It's been a long time, and I think it shows that the municipalities, the water districts are doing a good job of securing those water rights. And, the tap fees are incredibly expensive now for new, if you go to Elko and you say, I want to just build one house, I'm not a developer, and they'll say, okay, your water tap was over $100,000 now. And
which amazes people coming from other parts of the country.
Yeah.
I've got friends right now who are building properties out east, and they're like, how much? $100,000? And just for people who aren't familiar with the terminology, a water tap isn't, your faucet on your sink.
Right. That's good.
It is the giant, big connection from the street to the pipe that comes into your house. That's what we call a water tap that allows you to have water. And there's the physical installation of it, and then there's the right to have that water as well. And that's what makes it the most money.
Yeah. And so I tell people it's part of the beauty of buying real estate in this area is essentially you're buying a water right. That tap that comes with the house that's buried in your front yard is essentially a right to buy water from the city of Fort Collins or whatever your water district is. And over time, just like with your house, that's going to become extremely valuable. I mean, you talk to farmers on the Front Range and what's worth more, their 1,000 acres of land.
Yep.
Or the water that they irrigate it with.
I remember moving to Fort Collins 2011, and my neighbor, Topper, passed away recently, sadly, was driving me around. I was like, Topper, why are all these fields unfarmed? And he was like, water rights. Water's like gold in northern Colorado, and it's more profitable for them to just sell off the water rights than it is to grow on those fields. And that just blew my mind. But it's, yeah, I mean, we're in dry desert, we're in high desert, right? So it's tough.
Yeah.
I took a 4-hour water class last year as part of my annual, annual needs, right? You have to have your set number of continuing education credits, and that 4 hours just opened up my eyes to so much about water that just the average person doesn't know about.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a different thing out here, and to try to wrap your head around it takes a while. And one of the things that I will also tell people is, Fort Collins has changed a lot, but I think there's going to be a lot of land that never gets developed in this area. There's going to be a lot of cornfields and wheat fields that, as much as they would love to put homes on them, like at some point, and I don't think we're probably too far away from that, they're just not going to be able to build homes because they're not going to be able to get water, unless we have some like kind of a game changer. There's a guy trying to bring water from the Green River in Utah, and Wyoming, in western Wyoming, to the Front Range, build a pipeline along I-80 for 400 miles. There will still be some new construction. There is new construction occurring, but the amount of money it costs to get that new construction done, and at some point, I like Severance is not selling water taps. Severance basically has a moratorium on new development.
They've been cut off.
East Larimer County Water
Oh, it's funny. You get it? Severance?
Oh, big car.
God,
I always miss your
Florida is the one who ever gets that joke.
Yeah.
No,
So,
yep, I'd heard Severance, but yeah, moratorium.
there's a number of water districts that,
Well, and I'd heard the city of Fort Collins, and I don't know the exact date on this, but the city of Fort Collins has set a date for no more new construction neighborhoods. That's it. We're done.
yeah,
We're becoming Boulder.
right.
You can't. Am I right? You can't build neighborhoods in Boulder.
And Boulder did that a long time ago.
Right. Because they're landlocked. But essentially, we're not far off being landlocked.
Yeah.
We've got the only way we can really spread is north up to Wellington. Wellington and Fort Collins are starting to share borders, especially with that one neighborhood that hasn't got the water rights yet, that will get them.
Yep.
That's up there by the Budweiser plant. Or you go east of I-25, which is still effectively Fort Collins, but it's a different feel out there, right? That appeals to a certain buyer that doesn't want the hustle and bustle of town.
Right. Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out over the next decade, but at some point, now we've seen a bunch of, being in the business as long as you and I have, we've seen a lot of different markets now. And I remember when, after 2008, I think it was like 13 and 14, the market really started to pick up. We started to learn what multiple offer situations were like, and a lot of us had never experienced that.
I had a whole whiteboard set up. I had a house on Manchester Street that got 7 offers.
Yeah.
And I was super psyched, right? Because I'm from Manchester.
Right.
And we'd laid it all out. Every individual pro and con of the offer.
Yeah. So you see all these cycles, and you see our market weather these storms in a way that the national market just doesn't. We continually outperform, and for a lot of the reasons that we've already talked about. And so, I used to, as those prices were climbing really steadily, and then we started to see 10% appreciation per year, and then we started to see 15, and sometimes we would see 20.
21, 22. Mm-hmm.
And I didn't want to just tell people, hey, the market's going to go up forever, but at some point, like, you got to tell people, look, we've seen a lot of different cycles. If you would have told me that interest rates would go to 7.5 and our market would not correct, I would be like, no, there's no way.
Yeah.
The prices would have to come down. And you'll see people on Reddit and all the internet threads, just wait, just wait. The correction is coming. The crash is coming. And
why hasn't the crash come?
Well,
in your opinion? I got my theory.
I think a big part, you got to talk about different areas, right? Like, we've already covered a lot of the reasons why Fort Collins is resilient with pricing, and that's because they can't overload the supply. It's hard to build too many homes. The builders don't want to do it, for one, and for two, it's just incredibly expensive.
Inventory's always low.
Inventory is always low. You have clients that come in from out of town and you say, look, you come in for a weekend and look at property, you're going to see, you might have like 1 or 3 properties that you really like. Maybe I'll show you 10, but most of those are not going to be in your wheelhouse. You have to look at the market over a course of a couple months. You can't get discouraged just looking at a snapshot of the market. You got to prepare. This is a long haul. Let's look over 2, 3, 4 months. I think our average client closes in about 90 days after we start talking, but certainly sometimes it's longer and sometimes it's shorter.
Well, and using that phrase long haul to talk about something else. So yes, the market stayed incredibly stable in Fort Collins. Yes, there were people who bought houses after they had appreciated 21% from the year before. Those people also have 2.53% interest rates on their homes. And let's say their home has dropped in value 4%, like you'd said. But again, I think 4% is more on the townhouses, attached properties versus single family. You've still got a 3% interest rate. That's like gold.
Yeah.
Most of those people, unless they really have to, probably won't ever sell those homes. Worst case scenario, they might turn it into a rental and then go buy, then step up or step down, depending on what their needs are. But 3% is incredible.
It has certainly limited the supply of people that would, put their home on the market and upsize or downsize, or they just want a different home for whatever reason. But one of the things that I think a lot about is there are still plenty of people that do give up their 2.5-3% interest rate because your home is such an important thing. It's where you spend almost all your time. It hurts, but there are more people than you would think that can afford this market. And I think an underreported part of that is dual income households. There are a lot of them. And when, two people in a household are making $75,000 a year, $150 combined, it's not fun, but they can still afford to buy a $600,000 house at a 7% interest rate. And so enough of them are still doing that.
Well, but they're also probably doing it with a 2-1 buy down.
They might be.
Right?
Yeah, but some of them are not. Some of them are saying, I'm just going to take the 7 and I'm going to, negotiate it off the price. I mean, we structure them in a variety of ways, but
everybody's case.
Everybody's different.
I just sold 2 townhouses, both priced at $400,000. One wanted a $15,000 price reduction. The other one wanted $15,000 towards a buy down. Obviously, their financial situations were different. Same amount of money, but it was used a different way.
Yeah. And to your point, a lot of people are turning their current home into a rental because with that low interest rate, they can cash flow it. It's not uncommon for somebody to get $1,000, $1,500 a month in cash flow. Use that to offset the high cost of the new mortgage, paying down that mortgage over time,
That's
having
a
your
great
tenant
way of
pay it down.
Right, that $1,000 is a $1,500 a month. Is certainly paying a big chunk of your 7%.
It's a big chunk, and you're getting to add an asset to your portfolio. And there's so many people in this market in Fort Collins, they know, hey, I might not be getting great cash flow, but I want to own property here over the long term. They see the writing on the wall. A lot of hardcore investors Fort Collins is not their jam. They'd rather be in St. Louis, Missouri. I grew up in St. Louis. You can buy a $150,000 house there and you can get $2,000 a month in rent. I mean, the cash flow is incredible.
Right, but you are also how many miles from St. Louis, Missouri?
Well, I'm just saying,
I'm a big fan of, if I can't get there in 20 minutes.
Sure.
I had a house in Red Feather. As you know, I sold it recently. Broke my heart to sell that house. But every single time something went wrong, it was an hour up there. Who knew if I could get the supplies that I needed? An hour back. So I have the 20-minute rule. If I can't get to it in 20 minutes, don't do it. And I know there are property management companies, right? But your property management company in Missouri isn't doing the drive-by every month, making sure that renter.
Yeah.
Gosh, I got a property coming up next week. In 2 years, I would say that the renters in there had done $100,000 worth of damage in a 1,300 square foot house. $100,000. So, 20-minute rule. But yeah, I love the fact that you said, no, I'm switching back to what you came here with. If you've got a 3% interest rate on a house and you're getting $1,500 a month, that really helps with that 7% interest rate. I'd not thought about that, right? I'd not thought about that, Ryan.
Yeah, and that calculator we were looking at earlier, my dad is really good with spreadsheets and numbers, and I went to him and I said, Dad, I know that people buy houses because the tenant is paying down the mortgage every month, but the only calculators I can find are just quantifying the cash flow. And they're saying, okay, your cash on cash return given your cash flow is this amount. But what about the fact that you're paying down the mortgage $500 a month, usually like the first month, and then obviously that number gets a little bit bigger as the amortization schedule changes. So I couldn't.
And there's rent increase.
And there's rent increase and there's appreciation.
Yeah.
So I wanted to put all those variables in a spreadsheet and say, what's our cash on cash return, considering the cash flow, of course, but also the fact that we're paying down the mortgage and appreciation and potential rent increases. And so somehow his brain is different than mine. He created that spreadsheet, and it's fun to do that with people. It really helps them quantify, because everyone's like, well, if I'm in the stock market, maybe I'll get 7 or 8%. And we want to look at what a rental property, how that will compare your annualized rate of return compared to other investments. So it's a fun exercise to do with people.
And so when I talk to my clients about buying rentals, I talk to them about how the renters are basically adding to their 401k every single time they pay the rent, right?
Right.
They're paying down that house. They're also paying you rent each month. The property's appreciating, and then where my accountant knows way more about this than I do, you can also depreciate that property as well over time. And that's extra money in your pocket. So you kind of win four ways.
You do.
And Jessica's plan is, we own a couple of rentals. We're going to move into one of those rentals over time or in time.
Yeah.
Right? And then once you've lived there for 2 years, you don't have to pay capital gains when you come to sell it. Now, obviously, there's some requirements, right? $250,000 exemption per person, $500,000 max for a couple. Talk to your accountant.
Right.
But that is a great way of protecting your finances. We'll sell our current home and we may move into one of our rentals for 2 years, live there for 2 years, sell it, not have to pay that capital gains. A lot of people don't realize that.
Yeah. There's just so many things you can do with real estate. And, a lot of people, refinance, pull cash out. What other asset can you think of that, you can do that? And essentially your interest rate can only get lower. That's what I think people don't understand about commercial real estate is that commercial loans, they don't do 30-year fixed loans. They don't even do those in other countries. The 30-year fixed mortgage is an American concept.
Yep.
And I'm not sure I could articulate the history of it exactly, but man, what an incredible thing to be able to only lower your interest rate over the life of your ownership of that property.
Yeah, it'd be really interesting if we could get together a bunch of people who own different properties in different parts of the world and talk about that process.
Yeah.
How is it different? Now, I've got, obviously, right, I have clients who are from Europe, a good number from the UK, and they come over here and their mind is blown about how different it is. My best friend in England right now, who I grew up with, he's been buying a house for 5 months. Like, why is it taking so long? The process is just way more drawn out. Where, you and I, what's the fastest you have helped a client buy a house?
Couple weeks.
It's 7 days. 7 days. It was crazy. It was around Christmas, so fortunately I had the time, but we closed in 7 days.
Yeah.
And I'll never do that again. I think most clients feel it, right? They feel the pain when you close in less than 24, 28 days.
Right.
But yeah, 7 days you can close a house.
There's a lot of research to do in that 7 days.
Yes. Went well.
Yeah.
Yeah, it went well. And it had an incredibly elaborate heating system. Underfloor radiant heat, which we weren't seeing much in Fort Collins. We see a bit more of it now, but not much then. And fortunately, I have a client who puts those in high-end homes, and we got him out to see it. That was the biggest thing. It was like going into a submarine. There's like pipes and dials and taps and knobs everywhere. And we got it figured out.
Yeah, those in-floor radiant systems can be, you go in those rooms and you're like, this must be $50,000 worth of copper in here.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah, they're pretty wild.
So what are we seeing? What are you seeing now? We've talked about how the market was super slow.
Yep.
August, September, October. How's your year started off?
I started off really good. Definitely got a couple of deals fit in right before the new year that we were excited about, that we, didn't know if they were going to sell that quickly, and Christmas came around and boom, we got offers. But rates are back up. They're back up to 7.25. It's just heartbreaking to see that we were at 6.25 just a couple months ago, and now we're back up. But at the end of the day, I think the public is not quite, certainly they are rate sensitive, and certainly we see the market pick up. But I think at this point, people are like, hey, it's January, it's a new year. If they've been thinking about buying a house, they're going to be starting to look. If the interest rates go up, to 7.25, it's not like they're just not going to buy for most people. Certainly there are people that are right on the cusp, and if rates do go up, even with a buy down, they may not be able to be in the market. But generally speaking, the people that call us are aware of the market interest rate situation. Another thing I would encourage people to do is not to Google interest rates. If you Google 30-year fixed mortgage rate, Google will typically tell you a rate that is a half a point higher than what we're actually getting on mortgages. And this is something that we talk about a lot and maybe ad nauseum, but preparing yourself with going through the mortgage pre-approval process, even if you think you might not be buying a house immediately. I can't tell you how many times I've seen a great house pop up and the buyer wasn't quite ready and they were scrambling. They were surprised by how much they liked the house. I always tell people, if you're going to get out there and start looking, be prepared. You will, it'll happen. If you're not ready to buy right now, don't start looking, because as soon as you start looking, the wheels will start turning. And a lot of people say, well, I don't want to pull my credit because I'll get that little ding. My credit will go down a couple points. And I tell them, if your credit is going to go down a couple points, and that might be the difference, that might pass you by the 720 threshold, which is the difference between A and B credit, you need to know that in advance. Because I've had plenty of folks, oh, I got perfect credit, and then they pull it the day we're making an offer on a house, and they see that, wait, what is this? They had some bill that they didn't know about, that didn't get paid, and it dropped them down into the 600s, and they're not getting the interest rate. So just get it done early. Get yourself in a position where you can shop over a couple months, and you can pounce when the right thing comes up, and that's when the great outcomes happen.
Well, and there's two types of credit scores, right? I'm going to dig a hole for myself here. But there's the credit score that you get when you look on Experian and these credit check websites. And then there's the credit score that you have for a home purchase. And the home purchase credit score is ever so slightly less than what Experian and those type of websites, those credit. I didn't know this.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I was looking to buy a rental, and I was talking to my lender, and he's like, well, your credit score's here. I said, well, my credit score should be a 780. And Experian tells me it's a 780. He's like, well, actually, it's 772. And that, believe it or not, 8 credits got me a slightly lower rate on an investment property. But I didn't know that there was two different mortgage lenders look at it different than if you go to Home Depot to buy a new television.
Interesting.
Yeah. That's probably another podcast that we need to do.
Yeah. So I think overall, I expect kind of the same sort of like moderate appreciation probably this year. Obviously, it's all, has to do with interest rates, but I I'm just not convinced that those interest rates are going to fall as fast as people are hoping and expecting.
I think it's going to be a couple of years.
Yeah.
Are you worried about a flood of homes coming on mid-year and there not being enough buyers in the market because buyers are starting to do their home buying now and that people are waiting? I have 3 clients right now who have all said to me, we want to hit the market at the absolute best possible moment. Well, there's no fixed date on the calendar for that, right? Those dates can fluctuate a little bit. Like we've been saying, that the market's picked up way earlier than it used to. So I would typically say that May. Don't wait much longer than May if you're trying to pick and choose your dates. Because if you wait until June the 1st, which might be the pinnacle, that's a moving target. And I've had too many houses over the years where the sellers have put it on in July and we're waiting 20, 30, 40 days for an offer. Where in May, if you've got a well-prepared, well-marketed home that's priced for the market, that should sell in a week.
I think June is too late.
Yeah.
I think May is about as late as I would go. I would not count out listing now, because I do think the market is very active and a lot of people are going to wait into the summer, and I think you can have some pretty good outcomes earlier in the season than people think. Of course, your landscaping's not as pretty and the photos are going to be wintry, but good things can happen getting properties on the market early season.
Yep, agreed.
Well, man, that was good conversation. Covered quite a bit.
We did.
Anything else you want to add before we wrap up?
We'll just talk more next week.
We'll do more. We'll keep this coming. Appreciate you guys listening. And it's Robert Crow and Ryan Jenkins, Grey Rock Realty. Feel free to reach out to us. Contact information is in the show notes. And hope you guys have an awesome 2025 and Happy New Year.
Have a brilliant 2025.
Thanks, Robert.
Watch out for those torches.
Yes. Torches. Nice.